Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Barry. It's lovely to see you again.
Lovely to see you too.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the show topic today. It's called, excuse me, I'm a little hoarse here. It's called, no, I'm not a little horse. I'm just a little croaky. So anyway, the show topic today is the gift of vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And I love this topic for many reasons. For somebody that spent most of their life hiding out, afraid to show myself, this has been huge in my life. So I think we're both going to have a lot to say about this. And
Just a little, yes.
just a little. And what I also wanted to mention, what I was thinking, Barry, before we started the show, was that being British, vulnerability is not exactly encouraged in our culture, is it? You know,
Oh, sorry, was I laughing out loud? Sorry.
yeah, it's the
That's an understatement.
yeah, exactly. It's the stiff upper lip. It's the don't air your dirty laundry. It's the, I'm sure there's a million other phrases that go along with
Suck
it.
it up, buttercup.
What was that one?
Suck it up, buttercup. You haven't heard
Oh,
that one?
I haven't heard that one. That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's that whole sort of aloofness that yeah, it's a fascinating how our cultures can. I remember when I first came here, I was just in my it was 2000. Sorry, 1990. Sorry, 1981. So I'd just turned 21 or 22 when I came here, and I remember thinking, "Oh my God, people talk about this stuff." It was all those buried secrets. I remember watching Oprah and she was like, yeah, well, I was molested when I was a child and I'm this. And I'm like, you say that stuff out loud? It's like, so
Yeah.
I suppose I've become American. I say everything now.
Yeah, I would say definitely I think the higher value label I would used to use would be very stoic, and I mean stoicism. But truly, it was just being aloof and stuck up and unemotional. So it wasn't actually a very healthy way to be, even though it looked impressive. And for me, because I came out the same year you did, I definitely, for me, it was actually a couple of years later when I was I was immersed in the personal development field for the first time, and I'll share about that a little bit later. But the moment that shifted was probably the most scariest and yet the most freeing moment I think I've had along the way. So definitely, this is a good topic to talk about today.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. Well, it's up for me. It's very up for me. Yeah, I had a couple of weeks ago, I had an experience, we'll call it a journey, we'll leave it at that, where I was very open, wide open. And what I realized is not everybody they do for a short time, but then the walls go up.
Hmm.
And for me, I was so wide open. I just wanted to stay wide open. It was like, okay, we're all going to play. What's coming up for everybody? But I
Hmm.
also respect when some people just need to just sort of like they've revealed enough, and I get that. I used to say when I was younger, I used to say that I was an emotional flasher. You know those people in like trench coats and they're naked underneath. I
Yep.
would
Yep.
stand there and I would like go, I'd flash my nakedness, and then I'd close the raincoat and scurry away quickly. It was like so now I just leave the raincoat open and everybody can see everything that's going on underneath most of the time anyway. So, but
We
it's
are speaking emotionally here, not physically, just to be clear for everybody listening.
yeah, exactly. Unless you want to see it physically too, I'm sure I'll be able to do that one too. No, I'm not at my age. Sorry, that's not happening. But back to that vulnerability and how I used to live and how I live today. And the reason why I called it the gift of vulnerability is that when I was hiding myself, I lived in a world that had a lot of, in a dialogue of criticism and judgment of who I was, not being good enough, not being this enough, and everything. And that's why I was hiding, because I was afraid that if I was to expose myself to anybody or to the world, that I would be exposing all my faults. Everything was wrong with me. So I closed in, held it all in, and had this great veneer, this great looking like I had it all together on the outside. But inside was this massive sort of internal voice of you're not good enough, you're stupid, you're this, all those, things I had going on. But the beauty of being vulnerable is that you find out you're not alone. And that internal dialogue that I thought was just mine, describing me, is actually one that's shared by a lot of people. And when you do that, when you have that courage to open up and say, this is what I feel inside, and people go, oh, me too. And then there's a me too, and another me too, and another me too. And all of a sudden you realize you're no different than anybody else. I mean, we all, to varying degrees, have different sort of issues we're dealing with, but for the majority, we all suffer from that insecurity and that inner voice that puts us down, keeps us shut down and hiding. So what about you, Barry?
Well, I was going to say mine was a little different because being a boy growing up in England,
Mm-hmm.
there was more about being tough and to hide ourselves and being seen, emotionally speaking, or being vulnerable was self sabotage in a way. It was
Mm-hmm.
viewed upon as being something negative because the toughness was what was respected. It was the stoicism. It was the um, having it all together and not showing any sort of weakness was kind of the programming, the voice that was running in my head. And say coming out here was where things changed. Yes, America was such a bad influence to both of us. Um, the thing was, in my first deep immersion into seminars and workshops and retreats, because I've been doing this since the mid-'80s, I remember vividly in the second one I took, there was this, for want of a better word, confrontation that I had, where basically I was being called out for hiding. And that's what it was, really. I mean, most of the thing about the opposite of vulnerability really is hiding. It's not strength necessarily.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
of course, I had programming that being strong will be undermined by being vulnerable somehow. This is the logic I had. And what I discovered was in this process was when the walls came down, metaphorically speaking, when I basically let down the walls and let people in and actually became vulnerable, what I discovered, and because I've been hearing this for a while, but what I discovered myself was that the amount of strength I had when I was vulnerable was much greater than the shell I was using to protect myself for all that time beforehand. And for me, the gift in that was that I got connected to people. I became more intimate, more open to people. And this wasn't about romantic relationship. This was about people in general, friendships, social circles, people I was connected to. And it also, and this is the funny thing, the side effect of this, what I didn't expect to happen was I actually earned more respect from people because they could see who I was and who I really was. And that became a gift that touched people in a way that I didn't expect. So there's all these benefits that came out of being vulnerable that I had no clue about.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the rules I had about, holding it together and being tough. Looking back now, if I'd stayed that way, I probably would have had a much harder life than I've had since. So being vulnerable was a gift, definitely.
Oh, 100%. And I so relate to what you're saying, even though I was a girl, not a boy growing up, um,
Indeed.
because of the environment I grew up in, which was, basically, I didn't have a mother or a father, to be really honest, that was present when I was certainly a father that was completely absent, but I also had a mother that was absent emotionally and and physically, quite honestly, from a very, very early age. I would even say from birth. So I very much had it inside me that I'm the only, I got to tough this out alone. I can't lean on anybody. I've got to be strong. So I had that shell of super independence from a very early age. I left home at 16. I went to live in Spain at 18. I came here when I was early 20s on my own, never knew anybody. It was always this sort of like trying to prove myself
Yeah.
that I was resilient and that I could make it on my own. But what that did was, as you said, that sort of false bravado was strength and hyper independence was a weakness. I was just
Hmm.
afraid of getting attached. I was afraid of needing somebody and having it taken away. So it's actually it's it's not a strength. It looks like a strength from the outside. People are like, God, you're so independent. But it's not. It's a shell. It's a protective layer. But when you do have the courage to just open yourself up, let people see who you are, risk rejection, risk people saying, I don't like that, I'm walking away.
Yeah.
That's true courage. That's incredible courage to me. Not the holding up, walling in, or even going and sitting in a cave in the Himalayas. I mean, often people have there's a spiritual avoidance that can sometimes happen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So there's ways we isolate, and the ways we don't become intimate with others um, as a shield. So that's very much what's sort of coming up for me right now.
Yeah. Something on that you said that I want to underscore. It's a couple of things about it. One is definitely being vulnerable, or having that vulnerability as a way of being, is scary to a lot of people because they're simply seeing where they're not being vulnerable themselves. And for me, what's been really valuable from it is that I've discovered who I can count on.
Hmm.
I discovered who I can relate to, who I feel comfortable with. Somebody else is other people who can be vulnerable to share their truth, not to be like putting all their dirty laundry out, so to speak, but just about being having a softness, so to speak. And this is true for men and for women. It's not just because men we're this thing about being tough and everything else. But it's like no, when we can have softness in the sense that we can be accessible and be receivable, that we can have this. It's a word I'm looking for. It's coming through somewhere. But again, vulnerability, about having that place of being in this fluids. I don't know if fluid's the wrong word either. Damn, well, it'll come back to me.
That's
But the
okay.
sense of, say again.
I said that's okay. It'll come when they're ready. Those
It'll
words.
come when it comes. Yeah. But for me, the greatest gift of it is that, as I said earlier, about that connection and being able to be received and be in rapport with people. Because I realized also I was very isolationist before, even though I was with other people. That's the other part of this as well. Is not being vulnerable or being invulnerable, the opposite of that, being tough, meant that I could only get so close to people. There was always a barrier or a boundary in between. And to have that honesty and openness and trust and all these wonderful words of vulnerability meant that there was real connection, there was real friendship, there was real value in the people I was around.
Mm.
And so the gift and gifts, plural, of vulnerability are definitely abundant. And it sounds so simple to say it this way, but it has been many years of work to get to this point. So I'm not saying it's like you can just switch it on, you're done. But I'm very aware that it has something that I keep valuing that I said yes to many years ago.
Mm. Yeah, that's beautiful, and it really is. It's exactly, and that's why I use the word gift. It's a gift. It's such a gift. However you're received. But what I wanted to go back to for a second is because for me, I really am aware of where some of my decisions came from, where
Mm-hmm.
in my childhood a, a switch was flipped, say, where I made a decision about how I was going to move forward in my life. And I'd love you to share, I'm going to share mine for a second here, and you think about yours.
Oh,
When was that moment?
I already know.
You already know? Okay, great. Well, yeah, well, you go first then. I know mine too, so you go first. What was that?
Well, if you insist, yeah, couple of the ones that I know very vividly. One was, and I shared this before on a podcast. I was bullied in high school, um, high school. After you compare the American to the English education system, and it was one of the things where I realized that to survive, I had to be tough. I didn't necessarily become a bully myself, but to protect myself, the way I saw it again as a young teenager, was to be unemotional, not to show fear, not to show tears, not to show any sense of weakness, because that to me would make me more of a victim of the bullying. So one of the pieces was I'd stuff it out. I didn't stop the bullying, frankly. I mean, it went for 5 years, but it did make me feel like at least I didn't. Hmm, I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me weak. That was the logic I was running at the time, not realizing again the vulnerability wasn't weakness, but I didn't know that at the time as a teenager. The other second part, was the modeling my dad gave me. he didn't. We never hugged. I remember. I don't think we hugged at any time, really. Mum and I hugged, yeah, but not dad. So the wiring I had was that men don't show that emotional, in quotes again, weakness.
Mm.
That be tough was the way to be. So those are the two major imprints that I received about why vulnerability was not available.
Yeah.
After you.
Well, and the reason I just want to share the reason we're doing this is because I really I think for the listeners that it's wonderful to go back into your life, your story. When did you decide that being vulnerable was dangerous? When did you decide to shut that down? And when
Right.
is it, and how long has it been controlling your life and in what way? And I think when we can identify that, we can just sort of look at it and go, oh my God, that was a survival mechanism that we needed as a child, but it's no longer needed. And in fact,
Right.
getting in the way of you living life. And for me, it was very much it was a series of events of danger in my circumstances growing up, of being seen, being vulnerable, especially as a fatherless child. I was very vulnerable to, I fell in love with every man possible, from the dustbin men to the and the bread man. I mean, I was just
Yeah.
like, I love you. Will you be my daddy? And, some of those men were lovely men and some of those men were not so lovely men. And there are men out there that do take advantage of young children that don't have fathers to protect them. But for
Right.
me, there was also the time, I remember it was when I first attended primary school, and it was a little village school. Excuse me. And I remember Mrs. Roberts saying to the little kids in class, she said, okay, we've got a very special visitor today. And I want you all to, she told us the day before, she said, dress nicely tomorrow. We've got a very special visitor. And so
Hmm.
I came to school that morning and I was convinced that the special visitor was my father. My father was actually going to come to school and tell everybody that I was his child. So this very nice man comes into the classroom and he's in a suit and he looks lovely. And I'm thinking, gosh, he tidies up well when he doesn't have his mechanic's uniform on, because I'd only ever seen him from afar. I hadn't really seen him. So I was convinced that this was my father. So we were all
Hmm.
sitting around on the floor and he's on a chair. And um, I remember I was so excited. I did this like sort of little doggy thing, and I went up on all fours and sort of pretended I was a doggy and climbed on his lap and licked his face and looked at the rest of the kids on the floor. Like there was only about 10 pupils in my class going and saying, "This is my daddy." And then Mrs. Roberts' face looked horrified. And
Imagine.
she sort of peeled me off him and said, now, this nice school inspector is only here to see how we do, our lessons. And anyway, needless to say, when he left, I got the beating as we used to get in those days for how could I have embarrassed that nice man and you know, la 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 whatever. But I remember the shame I felt in that moment of having exposed myself, of having really, really gone completely exposed. I didn't just say, "Oh, this is my father." I did like a doggy act. I got on his knee and I licked his face and everything. And that shame I carried in me was like I felt the door shut down. Then it was like I will never risk embarrassing myself that much again by showing how much I need somebody or want somebody or whatever it was. And I look back now and I think, oh my God, that poor little girl. She was just so vulnerable. She just wanted to, be loved. She just wanted to show her enthusiasm and her feelings, and to get shut down by an adult in that way and shamed in that way, and then for me to carry that shame for so many years, and really run my life from that way of not wanting to be seen. I mean, even to the point of my career as a stylist in Hollywood, it was like I can never be on stage. I can be behind the scenes, but I can't be on
Right.
stage. And I'm seeing it playing out now as I step on stages and do more speaking engagements. It's it's I have to I see that wobble. I see that wobble of that little girl that goes, "It's dangerous. Don't get on that stage. Don't be seen." But I am aware enough to know that was just an old way of thinking, again, a protective way of being as a small child, having to sort of, endure that situation. But it doesn't serve me anymore. It certainly doesn't serve, other people that have gone through the same things as I've gone through. And by sharing stories and getting up on that stage and being seen and letting them know that they're not alone, and that we are a tribe and we can find each other and heal together. So it's fascinating, and that's why I bring it up. Is it's so important to just, because sometimes we just operate from, I don't know why I'm like this. I don't know why I have this fear. I don't know why I shut down. But when we can identify that tipping point, we can go, oh, it doesn't have to control us anymore.
Well, the thing is that I can say this: we are decision making in machines as individuals,
Hmm.
and we often make decisions based upon data that's not complete. And especially as kids, I know I made. I mean, as you said with your experience, I definitely in my own experience I had instances where I made decisions that now look back on and going, they weren't the best decision. But of course, I didn't know at the time more information than I had to make a better decision. So that's what happened. The thing about it, and you said too, is as an adult we can look back and see through a different lens, a more clear lens, and a certainly more um, understanding, or I should say, wise lens. So we can see that the choice we made then was the best we could do at the time and what we knew, and could be done differently now.
Hmm.
And so from I mean, from my own experience, definitely I had glimpses along the way of quote exposing myself and then being shut down and feeling very regretful of having that experience. So for me, that lesson along the way is to, I guess it's like not lock in that decision making.
Yeah.
Like say that was a mistake. Okay, what was that? What can I learn from it? I'm grateful I've had this um, this inner voice, this wisdom, this guidance that simply goes, don't make that the be all and end all. Don't make that the law, because I had definitely had some things happen where I definitely started to like make that the rule of laws that this is the way it must be. And looking back and go, no, it wasn't.
Yeah.
That was the mistake at the time. That's what happened. And as an adult, definitely, again, I've had moments along life where I did have the experience of being rejected or shut down or chastised even for being too vulnerable, being too exposed in a sense. And I recognize now more and more, and this is the thing I learned big time, is it isn't about me.
Hmm.
It's their reaction, not me. And that's been very freeing to get to that point.
Yeah. No, that's huge. And that is the one we're going to talk about on the next show, when we talk about the the emotional hangover that some of us can experience when we've been vulnerable. But
Yeah.
back to what you just said a minute ago, you used the word mistake, and
Mhm.
that's a word I try not to have in my vocabulary, because even when I've done things that have, got in my way or cost me by, continuing a story that no longer serves me, or continuing a behavior that no longer serves me, I am so grateful that that little girl was so resilient that she knew in that time, at that moment, in that environment, it was not safe to reveal myself and my vulnerability. I had to go into survival mode, in that little school, in that village, with all the shame of being, who I was, that it wasn't a safe environment. And
Right.
so that resilience that I had as a 5-year old just came up and protected me. And as you said, it only becomes problematic when we're still doing that at 50, which to a degree, which to a degree, maybe not 50, but certainly 40, I was still sort of, operating from that way, on and off. Like I said, the emotional flashing, every now and again the coat would open up, but very quickly I would close it and retreat if I got re-triggered from that earlier event. Um, but I think, as you said, we were always doing the best we could with what we knew how to do something. Um, a lot of that survival mechanism served us as young children, as a teen, as in your case, the bullying. I'm sure that when you did sort of put on this shell of this exterior, that the bullying did stop for a while. and it probably worked in that environment, and it's like, wow, this works. But it's when we don't adapt to new environments that are safe. It's when we
Mhm.
don't sense that, oh, hang on a minute, I can take that armor off now. I don't need that anymore. And
Right.
especially when it comes into our, romantic relationships, or even that inner circle with our friends, to know, to sense. And as you say, not even just be like, okay, dropping all armor, I'm safe with everybody, but to just have that um, awareness of gauging, are these people safe? Are they my people? Are they my tribe? Are they going to, appreciate what I'm sharing with them, or are they going to attack it? So it's not sort of just going from being completely shelled in to completely exposing. There is that sort of nuance of testing the waters. Are these people safe? Are they people that are going to love me or attack me?
So one thing, because you had a comment about mistake that I want to respond to, because the thing for me is, and I use that term intentionally because I play with words quite a bit, and for me, one of the ones I love, mistake is a missed take,
Mm,
as in like in film when you say take one, take two, it's like you do a do over. So for me, the idea of mistakes is that it was a thing that was like, oh, that didn't work. Let me try something else. Versus you did something bad and wrong.
mm,
Because
yeah.
I know some people with the word mistake, and certainly the word, when you do something quote wrong has a massive negative connotation. And the recognition for me is definitely, as I said earlier about, but sometimes when I said something and realized it wasn't me, it was them. So I don't take it personally, or don't blame myself for something that was quote wrong in their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But the journey we're going through, and definitely talk about this in relationships as well, is that we can get into relationships where we start to carry such a burden of trying to do things perfectly, do things right, and there's trying and efforting and making it, and it's like it's more stress than it was meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
When we recognize that we do the best we can in the moment, as you said, it means relationships can be a lot more about the exploration and of the opportunity to connect and discover and make mistakes and then try and do it again, explore and have fun, and learn that it's okay to be, as we talk about in this topic, more vulnerable with each other. Because frankly, any relationship can be healthier and better and more fulfilling if both partners are vulnerable. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a simple law of physics,
Yeah,
so to speak.
exactly. Yeah, when we give each other permission to share the depth of who we are. I'm back to the mistakes thing because I remember we both went to USM, and I always remember Ron and Mary talking about, there's like a sort of a, and it's not the same for everybody by any means, but we have this sort of internal road that we're on, and sometimes we sort of veer off it a little bit, and then we sort of course correct, and we just veer off. So it's really, for me, it is the journey of like you said, we're never going to be right on that course. I mean, how boring would life be if we were always on that damn course anyway? It is the
Yes.
meandering on and off. It is the slight wake up call when we've gone a little too far to the left. It's like, whoops, wrong direction, course correct. So it's just
Yeah.
one of those things. It's just embracing, like you said, the messiness, there's nothing more rewarding than having insights to me. I mean, those light bulb moments where you're like, oh my God, I see this now. Oh my God, it's so exciting when we get to sort of have those awarenesses without
Hmm.
the sort of, oh my God, I've just seen this. How didn't I see this earlier? It's like, no, just be grateful you're seeing it right now. It's
Absolutely.
wonderful. Some people reach the end of their lives without any sort of like awareness or aha moments, or you know opportunities to grow and expand. So
True enough.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is a great way to end today's call. But again, please join us for next week, because we are actually going to go on the flip side of the gift of vulnerability, which we mentioned earlier, which was sometimes people wake up the next day going, oh my God, what did I say? How much did I reveal? Should I have done that? Was I too much? So join us next week. It's going to be a good one. I'm going to make
It will be a
Barry. I'm going to make Barry tell us all of the embarrassing moments.
That's what you think.
I Well, I'm certainly going to share mine, so I'm hoping you're going to join
Okay.
me. in exposing ourselves. So anyway, it was a great chat, Barry. Thanks.
Something to look forward to for everybody, I'm sure.
Yeah, really. Okay, well, I will see you next week. Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode fresh and shiny as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.